Hollywood's golden era wasn't just about glamour and stardom. It was also a time when the line between tragedy and mystery blurred into darkness. Behind the glittering facades and red carpets lay stories that would shock even the most devoted film fans. Some of the most beloved stars of their generation met untimely ends, and while official reports often cited natural causes or accidents, whispers of something far more sinister have persisted for decades. Poison, whether literal or metaphorical, seemed to claim these luminaries in ways that left more questions than answers. Were these deaths truly accidental, or was there something more deliberate at play? From suspicious circumstances to outright cover-ups, these 10 cases remain among Hollywood's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Join us as we delve into the dark side of Tinseltown's most tragic losses. Thelma Todd. Thelma Todd was the vivacious comedy queen of the 1930s, known for her roles alongside the Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy. But her life ended in circumstances so bizarre they've fueled conspiracy theories for nearly 90 years. On December 16, 1935, the 30-year-old actress was found dead in her car inside a garage, with the engine still running. The official ruling was carbon monoxide poisoning, deemed accidental or possibly suicide. But the evidence told a more complicated story. Todd had been at a party the night before, dressed in an elegant gown and expensive jewelry, neither of which showed signs of the struggle witnesses later described. Her face bore bruises, her nose was broken, and there was blood in her throat. Even more suspicious, her business partner and rumored lover, director Roland West, had reportedly locked her out of her apartment that night, and she had connections to mob boss Lucky Luciano, who allegedly wanted to use her restaurant for illegal gambling. Some believe Luciano had her killed when she refused. Others point to West, who supposedly confessed on his deathbed. The case was closed too quickly, and crucial evidence disappeared. Was Thelma Todd murdered and the scene staged to look like suicide? The poison that killed her may have been carbon monoxide, but the truth remains toxic and unresolved. Thomas Ince. Thomas Ince was a pioneering film director and producer, often called the father of the Western genre. His sudden death aboard William Randolph Hearst's yacht in November 1924 sparked one of Hollywood's earliest and most enduring scandals. The official cause was heart failure, but rumors immediately swirled that Ince had been shot, possibly by Hearst himself, in a jealous rage over actress Marion Davies. According to the whispers, Hearst suspected Davies of having an affair with Charlie Chaplin, who was also aboard the yacht. Some accounts claim Hearst aimed for Chaplin but accidentally shot Ince instead. What makes this case particularly suspicious is the complete lack of transparency. Ince was rushed off the yacht and died days later, but no autopsy was performed, and his body was quickly cremated. Hearst's immense power and media empire ensured the story was buried as efficiently as Ince himself. Witnesses were reportedly paid off or threatened into silence, and the district attorney, who happened to be a Hearst friend, declined to investigate. While there's no evidence of literal poison, the toxicity of power, jealousy, and cover-up poisoned the truth. Was Thomas Ince shot and left to die to protect Hollywood's elite? The suspicious circumstances and convenient cremation suggest we'll never know what really happened on that yacht. Carole Lombard. Carole Lombard was one of Hollywood's brightest stars, known for her screwball comedy performances and her marriage to Clark Gable. Her death in 1942 was officially ruled an accident, but the circumstances surrounding the crash that killed her have raised questions ever since. Lombard died when TWA Flight 3 crashed into Mount Potosi near Las Vegas, killing all 22 people aboard. She had been returning from a war bonds tour, doing her patriotic duty during World War II. But here's where things get strange. Lombard had a documented fear of flying and had wanted to take the train home. Her mother, who died alongside her, was deeply superstitious and had warned against the flight. Some conspiracy theorists suggest the plane was sabotaged, possibly by Nazi sympathizers who wanted to eliminate a prominent voice supporting the war effort. Others point to the fact that the crash investigation was unusually brief and that key evidence was either lost or never properly examined. There were also rumors that military personnel on the flight were carrying classified materials, making the plane a potential target. While these theories remain speculative, the timing and circumstances were certainly convenient for America's enemies. Whether Lombard was deliberately targeted or simply the victim of tragic chance, her death poisoned Hollywood's spirit during an already dark time. The loss of such a vibrant talent at just 33 left a void that has never been filled. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow was the original blonde bombshell, a platinum-haired icon who defined sex appeal in 1930s cinema. Her death at just 26 shocked the world and has been the subject of speculation ever since. The official cause was cerebral edema and acute nephritis, essentially kidney failure and brain swelling. But the circumstances leading to her death suggest potential foul play, or, at minimum, fatal negligence. Harlow had been married to producer Paul Byrne, who died under mysterious circumstances just months into their marriage, officially ruled a suicide, though many suspected murder. Some theorists believe Harlow knew too much about Byrne's death and was silenced. More credible is the theory that Harlow was slowly poisoned, not deliberately, but through medical malpractice. Her mother was a Christian Scientist who refused to allow proper medical treatment until it was far too late. By the time Harlow was finally hospitalized, her condition was irreversible. There are also darker suggestions that her husband at the time of her death, cinematographer Harold Rosen, or studio executives may have contributed to her decline to avoid scandal. Harlow had been complaining of illness for weeks, and some believe she was given substances to keep her working despite her deteriorating health. The combination of medical neglect, potential substance abuse, and the stress of covering up scandals created a toxic environment. Jean Harlow's death may have been from natural causes exacerbated by negligence, but the unanswered questions suggest something more sinister may have been at play. Bob Crane. Bob Crane's death in 1978 is one of Hollywood's most brutal and baffling murders. And while poison wasn't the weapon, the case is toxic with unanswered questions. The star of Hogan's Heroes was found bludgeoned to death in his Scottsdale, Arizona apartment, his skull crushed by a weapon never identified, with an electrical cord tied around his neck. The crime scene was contaminated, evidence was mishandled, and the case went cold for years. Crane had a secret life involving pornography and sexual escapades, meticulously documented with photos and videos. His friend, John Carpenter, who shared these interests, became the prime suspect. The theory was that Carpenter killed Crane in a rage when Crane tried to end their friendship and destructive lifestyle. In 1994, Carpenter was finally tried for the murder based on biological evidence supposedly found in Crane's rental car, but he was acquitted due to questions about evidence contamination and handling. The case remains officially unsolved. What makes this relevant to our discussion is the poisonous lifestyle that led to Crane's demise. His obsessions and the company he kept created a toxic environment that ultimately may have gotten him killed. Some believe there were other enemies, jealous husbands, organized crime figures involved in pornography distribution, or even someone from his television career. The brutality of the murder suggests rage and personal vendetta. Bob Crane's death reminds us that poison comes in many forms, and the lifestyle choices that seemed victimless can ultimately prove fatal. John Barrymore? John Barrymore was Hollywood royalty, a member of the legendary Barrymore acting dynasty, and one of the greatest actors of his generation. His death in 1942 at age 60 was attributed to cirrhosis of the liver and kidney failure, the result of decades of severe alcoholism. But Barrymore's story is one of self-administered poison, the slow destruction of extraordinary talent through addiction. By his final years, Barrymore was a shadow of himself. His once sharp mind dulled, his legendary good looks ravaged, his career reduced to self-parody. What makes Barrymore's case particularly tragic is that many believe Hollywood itself poisoned him. The studio system enabled and even encouraged his drinking, as long as he could still perform. Friends and colleagues watched him destroy himself, but did little to intervene. Some accounts suggest that studios actually provided alcohol to keep stars compliant and dependent. There are also darker rumors that Barrymore knew secrets about powerful figures in Hollywood, and his alcoholism was encouraged to keep him from talking. Whether through deliberate enabling or simply callous indifference, the industry that made Barrymore a star also facilitated his demise. His final years were marked by humiliation, including appearing in terrible films just to pay his bills, and allegedly being so poor he couldn't afford proper medical care. The poison that killed John Barrymore came in a bottle, but who kept filling that bottle and why raises questions about Hollywood's responsibility for its stars' welfare. His death was slow, public, and entirely preventable. Judy Garland's death in 1969 was officially ruled an accidental barbiturate overdose, but the truth is that Hollywood had been poisoning her since childhood. MGM Studios put the teenage star on a regimen of amphetamines to control her weight and keep her energized during grueling filming schedules, then gave her barbiturates to help her sleep. This created a lifelong addiction that would ultimately kill her at just 47. By the time of her death, Garland had attempted suicide multiple times, been through failed marriages, financial ruin, and career collapse. The question isn't whether she died from an overdose. The question is whether decades of studio-enabled drug dependency constitutes a form of murder. Garland herself spoke about the abuse she endured at MGM, including being groped by studio executives and called derogatory names about her appearance. She was worked to exhaustion, denied proper nutrition, and chemically dependent before she was even an adult. Some conspiracy theorists suggest her death wasn't entirely accidental, that perhaps someone wanted to silence her as she began speaking more openly about Hollywood's dark underbelly. Others point to the suspicious timing of her death, just as she was attempting a comeback. More likely, Garland was the victim of a system that valued profit over people and that created the conditions for her inevitable destruction. The pills that killed her were in her own hand, but Hollywood put them there. Judy Garland's death certificate might read accidental, but the decades of systematic poisoning she endured tells a different story. Olive Thomas. Olive Thomas was a Ziegfeld Follies girl and silent film star whose death in Paris in 1920 became one of the era's most scandalous mysteries. The official story is that Thomas accidentally ingested mercury bichloride, a toxic substance her husband, actor Jack Pickford, used to treat syphilis. She supposedly mistook the poison for her sleeping medication in a dark hotel bathroom. But this explanation has never satisfied investigators or historians. For one thing, mercury bichloride was clearly labeled as poison and would have tasted horrifically bitter, not something easily confused with medicine. Thomas lingered for 5 agonizing days before dying, during which time she reportedly said conflicting things about what happened. Some accounts have her claiming it was an accident. Others suggest she knew exactly what she was drinking. The most popular theory is that Thomas committed suicide, distraught over her troubled marriage and her husband's infidelities and drug use. Pickford himself was a notorious philanderer and addict who would die young from alcohol-related illness. But there's a darker possibility, that Pickford himself poisoned her, either deliberately or by giving her contaminated drugs. The couple had been partying heavily in Paris, and some believe an argument escalated to violence. Pickford's family, including his famous sister Mary Pickford, had significant influence and may have helped cover up a murder. The French investigation was cursory at best, and Pickford left France quickly after his wife's death. Was Olive Thomas a victim of her own despair, a tragic accident, or something more sinister? The poison that killed her is known, but the hand that administered it remains a mystery. George Reeves. George Reeves, television's original Superman, died from a gunshot wound to the head in 1959, officially ruled a suicide. But the circumstances surrounding his death have made it one of Hollywood's most debated mysteries, and many believe he was murdered, metaphorically poisoned by the very role that made him famous, and literally killed by someone who wanted him dead. Reeves was reportedly depressed about being typecast as Superman, and struggling to find other work which supports the suicide theory. But the evidence tells a more complicated story. Reeves was found with a single gunshot wound, but there were no powder burns on his skin, suggesting the gun was fired from a distance, nearly impossible for suicide. There were also bruises on his body consistent with a struggle, and witnesses reported hearing not one, but several shots. 3 people were in the house at the time of his death, including his fiancée, and their stories contained suspicious inconsistencies. The prime suspects include his fiancée Leonore Lemon, his former lover Tony Mannix, or Tony's husband Eddie Mannix, a powerful MGM executive with alleged mob connections. Reeves had been involved in a long-term affair with Tony Mannix, and when he tried to end it, she reportedly became obsessed and threatening. Eddie Mannix was known to have fixed problems for the studio, sometimes violently. The investigation was rushed, the scene was contaminated, and the case was closed suspiciously fast. Was George Reeves driven to suicide by a career he felt poisoned by typecasting? Or was he murdered by jealous lovers or studio enforcers? The evidence suggests the latter. Albert Dekker. Albert Dekker's death in 1968 is one of Hollywood's most bizarre and disturbing cases. The character actor, known for roles in films like Kiss Me Deadly and The Killers, was found dead in his Hollywood bathroom under circumstances so strange they defy easy explanation. Dekker was naked, bound with ropes, with a hypodermic needle still in his arm. Obscene words and drawings had been written on his body in lipstick. There was a noose around his neck, and he had apparently been engaged in autoerotic asphyxiation. The official ruling was accidental death during a sexual act gone wrong, but many aspects of the case suggest foul play. For one, Dekker had been missing for several days before his body was found, and his apartment had been locked from the inside with chains. Could he have set up such an elaborate scenario himself? Some believe Dekker was murdered, and the scene was staged to look like a sex accident, humiliating his memory and covering up the real motive. Dekker had been politically active, particularly critical of right-wing organizations, which made him enemies. He also had financial troubles and complex personal relationships that could have provided motives for murder. The drugs found in his system have led some to believe he was poisoned or drugged into compliance before being killed. Others suggest he owed money to dangerous people or knew damaging secrets about powerful figures. The elaborate nature of the scene, The bindings, the writings, the staging all suggest either a deeply disturbed personal act or a deliberate attempt to humiliate and discredit him posthumously. Whatever the truth, Albert Dekker's death remains one of Hollywood's most macabre, unsolved mysteries. These 10 deaths remind us that Hollywood's golden age had a dark underbelly where glamour and tragedy walked hand in hand. Whether through literal poison, toxic relationships, studio exploitation, or mysterious circumstances that were never properly investigated, these stars met ends that continue to haunt us. Some may have been accidents, others suicides born of desperation, and still others possible murders covered up by powerful forces. What unites them is the sense that we'll never know the full truth, that the real story died with them, buried under layers of scandal, cover-ups, and Hollywood's eternal need to protect its image. These cases challenge us to look beyond the official narratives and ask difficult questions about power, exploitation, and justice. The poison that killed these stars came in many forms, but perhaps the most toxic element was the system that valued them more as commodities than as human beings.